In this video, I'm going to give you the rundown on this massive 3D printer that's sitting behind me and why I think this budget-oriented 3D printer is actually going to be replacing my tried, true, tested, proven, premium PRUSA printer. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy. This is RoadsideRC. You'll tend to find me bashing or crawling or drifting or racing, plus doing product review videos and how-tos, and this is the Elegoo Neptune 4 Plus. Yes, I'm not sure if I'm actually saying the name right. Elegoo, Elegoo. I don't actually. You can just read it. I'll put a sticker up here. You can just read what it says. Neptune is their 3D printing series 4 4th generation. Plus is the huge thing. It is absolutely massive. I actually have to pull my workbench away from the wall just to even get it to sit here. But this thing boasts a 320 by 320 by 385 print surface for $350. So we'll talk more about how that compares to my PRUSA and the other competition later, but just know that's huge for a really good price. As I was doing research on this Elegoo Neptune 4, a lot of mixed reviews online about performance and print quality and that kind of thing. So I was a little bit concerned, but the price was still very tempting and the size. So in order to counteract that, 3 things that I did very specifically. It comes mostly assembled. It's like in just a handful of parts as you get it. During assembly, I was checking all the screws. Is everything tight? Does everything feel like it should? And for things that I was putting in metal to metal, I was using thread locker on. It sometimes says it in instructions, sometimes it doesn't. Highly recommend it because that will help keep things where they meant to be. Overall assembly time was about an hour or so. It's not that complicated. This whole bottom base already comes assembled. This whole upper piece comes assembled. You're bolting them together, plugging in the little screen and all that kind of stuff. You're doing some pretty minor work, which was super welcome because when I assembled my PRUSA, it took me like literally from morning to sundown non-stop working on it just to get it assembled. Third thing is, after looking at all the reviews and everything and my personal experience, as it appeared, bed leveling was absolutely key. So it has a whole system where it walks you through how to level the bed. You're sliding a piece of paper under 9 points as you go through here, and you're turning these wheels up and down in order to get it level. And what I would say is I felt like I almost spent as much time on that as I did on the full assembly. I did it over and over and over again because you have on here 6 different screws that you're using in order to level this bed. And so what I found most useful was to loosen up the center ones, level the whole bed with the 4 corners, and then bring the center up to level. But this is metal and it changes with temperature and all that. So after I did that, I still had to come back around and do it again because pushing up here changed all of these by a very small amount. I believe that leveling was, in the whole process and being very diligent about that, is probably what was causing most people's issues. So I set off to do my first print because this is the awesome part about 3D printing. You got to print a thing. Of course, the first thing you're going to print is a benchy because you just do it. Plus, they provide a little SD card for transferring files around, and it already had the benchy, the typical XYZ benchy file on there. So of course I wanted to do it, and it failed, and it failed again, and again, and again. It just continued to come off. And part of it, I think what was happening here is it was printing so incredibly fast. This thing claims up to 500 millimeters per second. It was printing in the 200 to 300 millimeter per second range, which is staggeringly fast compared to some other printers that are out there. I think it was just getting ahead of itself. I also do believe that, again, the leveling and the exact leveling of the center of the bed, the exact center where this was being printed, might have been slightly off. So I let it warm up and I then re-leveled the bed with everything nice and warm, did it again, and I finally get my perfect benchy, which is exactly what we were looking for. Honestly, it came out really, really good. And ever since then, haha, we've been able to print big stuff, dramatically bigger things than what I've ever been able to print before. Very, very happy with that. Printed, this is a 3D printable top where you pull it and it spins it kind of like a Beyblade or something along those lines. And I've been printing RC crawler inserts. If you follow the channel, I recently did a video, and all of the crawler inserts that I printed for that video were all printed on this machine. So we have PLA of various forms. I have polyester. I have probably 4 or 5 different TPUs of different stiffnesses and everything that I've printed on here now. So yes, it is very happy to handle anything that you throw at it. As I got into the softer and softer TPU, one thing I did have to do right in through this little hole right here is your tension adjustment on the gears that pull the material down through. And then that soft material, those teeth were just having trouble gripping in on that material. So a couple rounds on the screw that's right in here in order to tighten up that mesh. And then ever since, it's printed absolutely beautifully. So I have some definite good things, bad things, pros, cons that I've had with this printer. I've been printing with it now for I think maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And so I want to run through 6 good things and 5 not so good, maybe kind of bad things that I've had. First up is the absolute speed. This thing literally prints about double the speed of what I've seen from my PRUSA printer. A print file that'll be 14 hours on the PRUSA is 7 here. It is fast and it does a good job even at that speed. Item number 2, pre-assembled. You know, the fact that I could assemble it so quickly really saved me so much time and effort, and I think makes it a lot less daunting for new users to get in. The absolute size of this thing is a pro. I'm going to be honest, it's also kind of a con. In order to get a big print surface, you have to have a big machine. The ability for this to print absolutely ginormous things on here has been very exciting and opens up new worlds that my smaller previous printer couldn't do. Hard to see here in the garage, but there's multiple sets of lights. If you look up in here, there's a whole light bar here, and there's a little light right in under here. I didn't realize how much I would appreciate that. But I actually used to keep a flashlight next to my old printer because I'd go into the room sometimes at night while it was dark and I'd want to see how the print was going. This one, you literally just have settings right here and you can turn those lights on or off as you want. The interface here, as I was just clicking on it, it is touchscreen. It is multicolored. You can come in here and as you click something to print, you know, it'll come up and actually show you what you're going to print to make sure you're doing the right thing and how long it should take. I found it a little frustrating to get used to at first, just because it wasn't what I had used prior. But now that I have been using it for a few weeks, I have found it very intuitive and very easy to come in and do whatever I need it to do. And then the last one is just the value. Again, $350 for this massive of a printer is almost unheard of. The technology and the speed the technology is evolving in these 3D printers is really, really nice to see. But there's a few things on here that aren't great. One of the things, even when you print it in silent mode, which you can choose when you're setting it up, it's really, really loud. Part of it is this massive fan. So this whole thing right here that plugs in is one huge fan system to help cool the material as you're printing. Yes, the print head has some fans on it as well. Even those are not quiet, but this thing, when it fires up, you can hear it throughout the whole house. The sound of this machine is definitely concerning. I've actually been testing a lot of things printing here. I think almost everything that you've seen here has been printed with this actually off. And I'm going to continue to test when do I need to use this. If it keeps coming back that this thing is kind of big, kind of in the way and just loud and I don't actually need it, then I'm actually going to probably take it off the machine. As I mentioned earlier, huge. This thing is massive, and so that also means that you need to be very cognizant of the space requirements that there are for this machine to run. Fully assembled, we are 21-ish inches wide, somewhere in the same 21 inches deep, and when you consider this plus a spool, you are well over 30 inches tall once you have a spool installed on it. And of course, you have to maintain a place for the wires to come in and out as the machine's going. So I actually find that on the table that I have this sitting on, I don't have it sitting outwardly facing like we have it here. I actually have it sideways on a regular basis to give the wires and the tray enough room to move. You have to consider where would you put something like this as you get ready to buy it. The other thing that has initially kind of confused me is, again, the filament break sensor is right here. So the spool goes here, the filament is going down through it, and it senses whether or not it's broken here. So that means if you ever get a break from here through the extruder and down, it won't know, and it'll just keep acting like it's printing. My PRUSA, this is built in like right here, and that seemed very logical. Make this as close to here as possible. I've actually wondered what would happen if I designed a new bracket for this to literally sit down like right on top of the extruder here and at least minimize some of that distance. But the truth is, so far, filament breakage is not really that common of a thing, so maybe it's not that big a deal. The fourth thing is that this uses a kind of proprietary slicer. So you can use standard Cura slicer for this, or it actually comes with its own download, so you can get an Elegoo specific version of Cura and use that as your slicer. And that's what I've been doing. The slicer works. It works well. Again, just kind of like the interface here, it has taken me a minute to kind of getting used to it, and some of the features that it has versus like my PRUSA. I would say the PRUSA slicer is dramatically better, I think, as being a slicer. And the problem is PRUSA slicer doesn't slice for this machine. So maybe they'll bring out a version later where you can do that, but you know, they don't really have any reason to necessarily. But the PRUSA slicer does really, really well. But I'm still able to do basically everything that I need to do with the slicer that's involved. It just feels a little clunkier. And then lastly on here, as you're printing, it'll give you a time prediction on here of how long it's going to take to print. And what I will say is when you come in here and you actually start a print, it'll say like this benchy will take 17 minutes. That's probably actually pretty accurate, but what I found is while printing, there's a number that shows up there on how long it expects and predicts that print to last during the print, kind of like a live update. That number appears to be almost junk and seems to fluctuate quite a lot as you are printing. So just a heads up, that confused me a couple times and caught me off guard a couple times. The total print that it predicts is usually fairly accurate. The live count seems a little bit off. I started this whole thing off with, is this going to replace my tried and true trusty? This is the PRUSA i3 Mark III. I've had this for, I'd say, about 2 years now. And if I'm honest, I've loved it. It has been great. It has, I've printed so much stuff on this thing. Absolutely lovely. I enjoy every bit of it, and highly recommend it. And it has got me hooked on printing. But is this better? Obviously, it's hard to even say anything besides the size here. I mean, the total size of the printer itself, of course, is dramatically bigger. But even if we just look at the print surface, 320 by 320 versus like 210 by 220. So 50% more volume of print surface over here versus here. If you're only ever going to be printing smaller stuff, then this is great. This is absolutely perfect. But if you consider that you want some bigger things, you're gonna want to consider stepping up to a printer like this. So beyond the size, you also have the price. So PRUSA's, no, they're like the fancy. They're like the fancy, as good as it gets kind of stuff that's out there. When I bought it, it was in that like $700+ price range. And when you go out there and look at it, they've now gone to the Mark IV. So this is one generation old now, and depending on if you get the pre-built or if you get the kit where you have to fully assemble it, the prices are somewhere in that $700 to $900 range. $700 to $900 range, which means this Elegoo, you can buy 2 of them. Or more than 2 of them. You can buy 2 of them and some parts. So even if you're concerned or scared about some of the reviews out there that aren't very good, you can buy one, see if it's good, throw the whole thing in the trash and buy another one and still be cheaper than this is straight out of the box. That's kind of wild. It's kind of wild, especially with as good a luck as I've had out of this thing. Like that price is obviously a game changer. For me personally, this PRUSA has done great. It is time for it to be retired, and it is going to go away, and this Elegoo, this Neptune 4 Plus, is now going to be my primary printer. Speed, size, cost, this is just where it's at. So I don't normally do a whole bunch of 3D printer kind of reviews and all that, but it is something in the RC hobby that I've absolutely loved and has been very valuable for printing body mounts or designing this, a bumper or this, or, you know, stuff like that. It's really, really been great. Never mind the random stuff around my house that I've used it for. And did I mention that swords are cool? Swords are always cool. So I hope this was useful for you, and if you're curious about getting a printer, which I've had some messages from some viewers talking about wanting to get into it, I'm going to leave a link to this Elegoo in the video description so that you can see it. I'm also going to leave a link to the newer PRUSA so that you can see kind of that difference and compare and contrast the specs just for yourself. I will say there's also some other printer brands out there, some Ender, Creality stuff that some of those are ones if you're wanting to get a printer as a hobby, not a printer as a printer, is kind of what all of everything that I've experienced with them. Interested, link in the video description. I hope this was useful for you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the video comment section, and I'll be happy to answer as many as I can. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.